We're breaking down the 28 details revealed in the Avengers Endgame commentary. Avengers Endgame finally dropped on digital this week, and along with the movie, fans got their hands on a ton of extras, deleted scenes, and of course, the all-important commentary track. Both the directing duo, the Russo brothers, and the writers, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, were on hand to give the inside scoop on unanswered questions, reveal surprising trivia and Easter eggs, and fill in some plot holes that had been uncovered by die-hard Marvel heads. And boy howdy, there was a lot to be learned. So, we're breaking down the 28 details discovered in the Avengers Endgame commentary. Let's start off with one of the newest members of the Avengers, Captain Marvel. There was a bit of a gap in between the first time we saw Carol with the Avengers in the post-credits scene for Captain Marvel and her first appearance in Avengers Endgame, when she brings down the Guardian ship carrying Tony and Nebula from space. Many fans were wondering how Captain Marvel was able to find the ship, and according to the Russos, off-screen she was able to locate the ship via a homing beacon that had been activated on board the Benatar and rescue its wayward passengers. And speaking of one of those wayward passengers, Tony Stark. What did we learn from the Russos about the first member of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Well, grab a tissue box because we learned a lot more about his death. First, the Russos revealed that the hologram message Tony is leaving for Pepper in the beginning of the film was a way to establish how his eulogy would be delivered at Avengers Endgame's end. It's a somewhat basic use of foreshadowing, but it did turn out to be pretty effective. As for that ending of his, the Russos also gave the inside scoops about Tony's final moments in Avengers Endgame. Firstly, some fans were left scratching their heads about how exactly Tony was able to remove the Infinity Stones from the gauntlet and then swap them into his version of the glove. Well, per the Russos, both the gauntlet and Tony's suit were built using nanotech and could communicate with each other, thus facilitating the switch. We also learned exactly where and when the iconic I Am Iron Man line was shot. Apparently, that was the last scene filmed during reshoots, and it contains a special connection for star Robert Downey Jr. The scene was shot at Hollywood's Raleigh Studios, which is right next to where RDJ shot his first screen test for the first Iron Man, way back before that film went into production. We know Avengers Endgame was all about closing loops, and we have to admit this is a pretty sweet bit of coincidence and closure. But let's move on to everyone's favorite purple-pantsed green Goliath, the Hulk. When we are eventually introduced to the new and improved Smart Hulk, this is one of the Russo brothers' favorite Easter eggs, specifically that the Hulk is munching on a certain Ben & Jerry's ice cream flavor that has been made in his name.
A Hunka Hulka burning fudge is our favorite.
While we know Hunka Hulka burning fudge was just made up for the Avengers movies, Ben & Jerry's should really consider doing a limited release.
It's not bad. A bit chalky.
Speaking of the Smart Hulk's debut, while this was something we did find out from the screenwriters at Comic-Con, it is confirmed in the commentary that Smart Hulk's debut was actually filmed and set for Infinity War. You may remember Banner's constant struggle with Hulk during the film. Well, originally it culminated with the two reaching a compromise by merging together as Smart Hulk and then bursting out of the Hulkbuster armor, which is why we have that infamous trailer shot of Hulk running alongside the rest of the Avengers in Infinity War, after which Smart Hulk takes on Cole Obsidian and obliterates him. However, during test screenings, it became apparent the scene didn't work. Writer Stephen McFeely reveals it was pretty clear that the movie could not handle this weird success. The movie needed to just stay in its succession of losses in the third act, which meant some hustling on the part of VFX late in the game. That certainly explains why we had the weird disembodied Ruffalo head on the Hulkbuster armor. Now, let's talk a little about the Hulk's one-time love interest and fellow Avenger, Natasha Romanoff. We didn't learn a ton about Black Widow in the commentary for Avengers Endgame, but the Russos did make a connection between Nat's role in the beginning of Endgame and Clint Barton's role to Natasha before 2012's The Avengers. In the commentary, the Russos explained that Natasha going to Tokyo to find Clint is meant to evoke how Clint pulled Natasha out of being a Russian agent in her backstory. But from her backstory, backstory to her heroic end, the Russos also divulged some details about Red Skull and where he'd go after Nat's sacrifice and the Soul Stone was removed from Vormir. The writers and directors couldn't come to a conclusive answer, but they did acknowledge that Captain America would have an encounter with Red Skull when Cap returns with the Soul Stone to close that loop. However, they were unable to agree on whether or not Red Skull would be summoned back to Vormir after he had been freed. On the subject of the events of Vormir, let's break down what we learned about Hawkeye. One of the biggest things fans were wondering after the release of Avengers Infinity War was, where was Hawkeye? Clint Barton is a founding member of the MCU version of the Avengers, so why was he sitting the big battle in Wakanda out? Did he just take the wrong day off? While we knew that Ant-Man and Hawkeye were both under house arrest for their actions in Germany during the events of Captain America: Civil War, fans expected him to show up in the third Avengers flick, if only for a moment, so when he didn't, people were left scratching their heads. Well, it turns out that first scene in Endgame with Hawkeye's family turning to dust before they even got a chance to eat those hot dogs with mayo was originally meant for Infinity War. But since the dusting sequence in Infinity War was already cutting across so many characters, the Russos decided it would be too disorienting to add in the Barton family just for that moment. And we have to admit, giving that scene room to breathe at the beginning of Endgame was probably the right decision since it opened the movie with such an emotional punch to the gut. Of course, Hawkeye wasn't the only one going through some family issues. Thor also really went through some in Infinity War and Endgame, from seeing his brother murdered before his very eyes, to feeling he failed to save half of the entire universe, to getting to see his BFF Mjolnir and mother alive again. The Russos revealed that when Thor and Rocket travel back in time and space to Asgard, for which the real-life Durham Cathedral in England was the stand-in, the entire sequence was filmed during the production of Avengers Infinity War, with the intention that it wouldn't be used until Avengers Endgame. It's also reconfirmed that the scene of Natalie Portman as Jane Foster was an outtake from Thor: The Dark World with Rocket Raccoon digitally added in. And where would Thor be without his roommates Korg and Meek? Joe Russo compares that living situation to a BBC sitcom that he'd love to see. As for Thor cracking open a cold one with the boys, the creative team behind Endgame said, "I'm also very fond of the fact that the magical weapon he took the entire last movie to get a hold of is now a bottle opener." And what about Thanos, the big bad who had been set up since the first Avengers flick in 2012? Well, the question most fans had was, how was the 2014 version able to time travel into the future? According to the Russos, Thanos and Ebony Maw are able to reverse engineer the Pym particles in Nebula's time travel suit, which allowed Thanos and company to shrink their ship and travel through time to attack the Avengers compound. Side note, it's also revealed that the Avengers compound was an abandoned conference room at the Sheraton Hotel near the Atlanta airport. As for Thanos' daughters, Stephen McFeely reveals that Nebula doesn't know how exactly her sister Gamora died, only that she didn't return and Thanos had the stone. The only people who know exactly what happened were the people who were there. But on a more hopeful note, the creative team behind Endgame left what happened to the time-displaced 2014 Gamora at the end of the film intentionally vague. If we had to guess, it's probably so the next Guardians film can be about the team searching for her. And one more Thanos tidbit, one of the shocking moments in the final battle was when Thanos was able to destroy Cap's shield with his own weapon, which seemed like it shouldn't have been possible with the shield being constructed from a vibranium alloy. Well, the answer for that is, while vibranium is the strongest element on Earth, whatever makes up Thanos' sword is stronger. And it is also speculated in the commentary that like Thanos' gauntlet and Thor's Stormbreaker, Peter Dinklage's Eitri could have forged the sword. In the commentary, it's also revealed that the white time travel suits we see for a good portion of the film and on Endgame merchandise were all made in CGI. This probably made it easier to hide them in the trailers to try to trip us up. Thanks. Moving on to some more cool special effects. Stan Lee was given ye olde de-aging treatment, or what the filmmakers called being Lola'd for his cameo. If you don't remember, it was during the scene when Tony Stark runs into his dad and we can see a cool 1970s Stan Lee yell at the army base, "Make love, not war," out the car window. Effects artists use images of Stan Lee in the 70s as a guide for his new look. It was also revealed that the introduction of time travel in the film was first seated in the Ant-Man films. This mention gave writers the opening to fully incorporate time travel without having to fully introduce the science of quantum mechanics. Staying on the Ant-Man train, let's move on to the true hero of Endgame, the one who saved everyone and probably has the most important role in the entire film, the rat who saved the universe. The writers explained that the rat pushing the button to save Scott Lang and in turn save the universe was just a coincidence. McFeely goes on to say, "Now we have a rule in writing that, sort of coincidences, you're sort of allowed them in Act 1. A coincidence late in the movie is perhaps lazy. I'm delighted that a rat has saved the universe." This puts to bed any theory about if there was someone or some force that got the rat to that exact spot to push the button. It just kinda happened. We wonder if Doctor Strange saw that rat saving the day when he was looking at the 14,605 realities. We also learned in the commentary that the scene where Robert Redford shows up after the events of the first Avengers film, reprising his role as Director Pierce, was at the time his last acting appearance on the big screen. While the commentary was shot a while ago when it was believed that his acting days were over, we are now hearing rumors that Robert Redford may play himself as the president of the United States in the upcoming HBO Watchmen series. If so, this might still hold true, as Endgame would still be his last film appearance. And finally, we learned a ton about our favorite boy in the red, white, and blue. According to the creative team, at the end of the film, Bucky did in fact know that Cap was going to stay in the past to live out his life with Peggy before he stepped on the platform, which is why Bucky says he'll miss him even though he would see him in just a few seconds. In fact, Cap's ending was also the first thing decided when the team began planning out the events of the two films. Speaking of going to the past, at the end, when Cap is dancing with the love of his life, Peggy Carter, it is revealed that we see them merely minutes after Cap walks through the front door. The creators point out that this is the reason why the front door is open. Another side note, it's also revealed that 1970s Peggy Carter nearly didn't make the cut, which would have been scientifically categorized as fucking bullshit. And lastly, one of the most controversial decisions in the film. No, not the idea to almost have Thanos walk in with 2012's Captain America's severed head, but the line, "America's ass." The inclusion of "America's ass" lines were surprisingly controversial. The creators didn't know if it fit the tone of the film. There was also the discussion of when Cap says it, even though we know he's against using strong language.
No one else is going to deal with the fact that Cap just said language.
The choice was approved, with the reason being that Cap has been through a lot in the 5-year gap and got the green light to reflect on America's ass. And you know what? We're all the better for it. Whew! Okay, you have now been burdened with the knowledge of the most important details we learned from the Avengers Endgame commentary. It just goes to show that even though the biggest movie ever made has come and gone from theaters twice, it still has plenty of juice to give. We'll probably be breaking this one down for a long time.
Yeah, I know.
But what do you folks think? What surprised you most from the commentary track? What was your favorite Easter egg? And which Avengers Ben & Jerry flavor would you rather try? Hunka Hulka burnin' fudge or Stark raving hazelnuts?
It's not bad, but chalky.
Let's discuss. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, why not give us a like and subscribe? If you want to get notified every time we go live with the show or drop a new video, feel free to mash that little bell so you can be up to date on all the latest theories, news, and rumors in the pop culture world.